This is another episode of Conscious Leaders, and today I'm joined by Rachel Savage, the founder of Brand New Story. So I met Rachel a few months ago, actually, at the Spirit of Business retreat with Jarvis Smith. He's another one of our conscious leaders. If you haven't tuned into him, you definitely should. And I was sitting next to Rachel and we just got along really well. And she was telling me about what she does. And I felt like it was perfect for conscious leaders. And so I managed to get her on. And basically, she is working with businesses and leaders to really define their brand story. This is not about marketing. This is much more about bringing the customer on the journey and also bringing employees on the journey. And I love how she talks about this story, this brand new story of a business or a specific leader, on how it can be used both for internal communications and for external communications. One of the things that we often see is that, brands or companies, they're so focused on the external that they forget about their internal teams. And I love that Brand New Story does use their model for also communicating internally with their employees so that the employees know what they're signing up for, who they're working for, how their role is vital to the success of this company. So we talk about Rachel's journey. We talk about what Brand New Story is, how it's evolving, the process that she takes her customers on. We talk about leadership. We talk about sacred leadership, spirited leadership, words that have not necessarily been in the tradition or vernacular for businesses, but that's starting to change. And we talk a little bit about how this is a journey and we're at the sort of the brink of this, or the cusp of change in businesses where spirit and the sacred is starting to enter. And then we talk about well-being, something that obviously I'm really passionate about. And Rachel shares her morning practices, as well as some other things that she does to stay well, and her definition of well-being, which is simple, but very vital and very poignant. So without further ado, I'm going to let you tune in to this episode of Conscious Leaders with Rachel Savage of Brand New Story. Enjoy. Rachel, so nice to have you to this episode of Conscious Leaders. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
So let's start off with your journey. You didn't always have brand story. You started off as a journalist, right?
Yeah, so way back in the mid-90s, I spent 5 years working as a journalist and deputy editor for the Big Issue in the Southwest in Bristol. And I think when I got to the end of that was such an amazing role. For 5 years. You had people saying yes to interviews that you would never normally get for a regional paper. It was an incredible time. And when I left there, because it's a social enterprise, it's a business for good, I just couldn't imagine myself working for anywhere else in the media, because there wasn't any other purpose-led publications then. So I found myself going in-house and working for Orange in Bristol. So the telecoms company, when they were really exciting back in the mid-90s, and their branding was just incredible. So I worked in internal comms and comms there. And then from there, I went to the Environment Agency, where I was for 5 years. They were an incredible place to work. I think that's really where all my environmental knowledge really got solidified there. And then I had kids and we left the city. We fled to Gloucestershire, up to the Cotswolds in Dursley. And just shortly after I had my second son, I joined Ecotricity in Stroud. So they're they were the first 100% green energy company. So I worked for them for a few years before going freelance.
And so where did Brand New Story come about? How did you get this idea that this was something that was needed?
So out of desperation, actually, it really wasn't pleasant. When I left Ecotricity, I became a copywriter. I hated the word copywriter. As a wordsmith, we all have words we do and don't like. So my two pet hates were the word copywriter and marketing. So I left there, and I really found myself struggling because I wanted to work for smaller, conscious brands. And they were run by absolutely amazing people, but they didn't have an identity. They didn't really have a story. They didn't really know who they were. And I just really struggled. I felt like I was kind of plucking words out of thin air and just really crap at my job. And all the purpose felt like it had kind of flown out of the window. And then I sat down to write my website. And also because I got quite frustrated because a lot of people you'd speak to them and say, you know, that they're creating a new website or whatever it is they wanted to do, or a new brand, or they were launching. And they'd say, you know, we've got tens of thousands here. This is for our website. We've got this budget. We're going to spend, you know, we've given a lot of money. We've got the logo and we've getting the website done and all of that kind of stuff. And I'd ask them, well, what's your budget for content? And they'd just say, oh, we haven't got a budget for content. And as a wordsmith, it happened, you know, that was the story. That was just like, that's the way it was. And I found it really frustrating. And then I wrote my own, and I kind of, you know, was grumbling to myself, bloody logos and websites, that kind of thing. And then I did the same. I gave all of my budget to a designer, said, I need a logo and a website. I'll do the content. And he did all the design. And then I sat down to write all of the content. And I just looked and sounded like every other copywriter out there. And there was no purpose. And I was just mortified. And I just pulled the website and thought, I'm not going to do this. I panicked. I got under my duvet and I turned to personal growth, because I had at that point decided that I would make it. It's lonely when you're an entrepreneur starting out. So I invited the universe to be my business partner and turned to self-growth, personal development, and came across a guy called Mastin Kipp, or who I've been following for a while. And there was an online freebie, which was his workshop in LA with the hero's journey, which is essentially a story template, which many people will have heard of, which was created by Joseph Campbell. And that kind of put me back in touch with that. And I did a double Google search, the hero's journey in marketing. Brand storytelling came up, and I just thought, that is it. That's what I want to do. And from there, can I keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
Yes. So from there, I then thought, well, I don't know what brand storytelling is. Like, what is brand storytelling? And in my mind, I had the image of each brand has a story that's written down somewhere, and that's its story. And I need to find what that is. So I went on courses, I read books, and I just went on this 2-year search looking for this elusive brand story. And then I realized that it didn't exist. So I created one. So what I do isn't brand storytelling. The marketeers are great at that. The in-house teams are great at that. What I do is I work with leaders and organizations for the creation of a story that begins with their purpose. So everything flows from that.
I mean, it's so powerful. And I do want to get back to inviting the universe in, because that's not the traditional way of, you know, developing a business. So I think we need to get back to that. But this idea around creating the narrative, but actually the narrative, it's already there, and it actually is connected to the founder. Yeah. So, and I know how lonely it can be starting your own business and trying to, you know, you have the vision of what you think you want it to get to, but there's so many steps to get there. When you're working with a leader, whether it's a founder or the head of a company, is there a specific process that you take them through to help them develop that story, to figure out what that story actually is? Yeah.
So, and the important point to probably make at this point is that so many, or pretty much 99% of stories that are out there that brands consider them to be their story are actually not the full story. So they're usually the founding story. And this is called, so if you think of storytelling, in most stories, most great stories, you have the hero and the mentor. Okay. So when a brand talks about itself, talks about its founding story, the founder, or whatever that is, that makes the brand the hero of the story. Okay. Yeah. So what the approach that I do, that I learned about from an amazing guy called Jonas Sachs in the States when I read his book, is that you actually make the hero is actually the customer. And for internal comms, it's the people, it's your people. And when
the people that are working in the company.
Yeah. So it can be used for internal or external comms. So you have with your story, you obviously have more than one hero, because you have different audiences. You have your internal comms audiences, and then you have your external marketing and customer audiences. And so they are the heroes of your story. And then the brand becomes and acts as their mentor. So that flips everything on its head and is much more empowering, empathetic relationship, and changes everything.
It really does change everything. I mean, you think about, who are you serving? Because it takes it away from the brand being this thing and what you're trying to put in front of someone, but actually really recognizing what is it that the consumer is lacking, or what is it that they need.
And
am I deciphering that correctly?
Yeah, totally. And that's where, the hero's journey comes in, because the first step in the hero's journey is when you think about stories like Harry Potter or Star Wars, the hero's never the wizard, never the Jedi. We meet them in their ordinary life, in their ordinary world, and they've got frustrations and they've got things they're struggling with. And you can't build empathy with somebody via your website just by putting, we're great, aren't we? Welcome to our website. It's actually speaking immediately to that person in their world. And so that you feel connected straight away. You don't even have to be in the room if you create that powerful brand, that brand story.
Yeah. Basically, I'm taking, if I read a website, I want to read it basically and think, oh my gosh, that person knows me already. And I've never met them, whether it's a person, an individual, or it's a brand. Yeah. It's like, wow, they really get what I need.
Yeah. And the moment that one organization does that, immediately they'll stand head and shoulders above the rest of their sector. Because if you've noticed, every sector of business, all of their websites, like I found with the copywriting, they all look and sound the same. And when they want to rebrand or refresh, quite often they'll look to their competitors and take the best of what the competitors are doing, because they're looking at all the other heroes. Whereas actually, put the magnifying glass on your customer and everything takes care of itself.
Yeah. And I guess I also, what it's sort of conjuring up in my mind is like, actually, we're all unique. So if we're each unique, each brand is also unique. So their story and what they have to offer is completely different from what their competitor is offering.
It is, yeah.
So based on that, what is the process that you take your client through in order to get to this point?
So it's a kind of a 3-part process. So the first part is the story creation. And that process actually is evolving as we speak. But by the way,
just to interrupt, as all of our businesses and everything is, it should always be almost like a work in progress, right? That it's definitely constantly being evolved and you're iterating based on what the needs are.
Yeah. So the first thing I do is work out what is that business's purpose. And the way I do this is that we look at the questions. What's the story you're seeking to change? What does that story look like now? And what will it look like when it's transformed? Because
how powerful.
Yeah. And that I could say that was a great idea I came up with, but that's one of the things I remember as clear as day. I was sitting here writing and it just came tumbling out. It was definitely felt like
it was those 3 questions just came out with like in flow moment that was totally what was intended. Yeah.
And I think when you look at a lot of organizations' purposes, first of all, you don't know, there's so many where you look at them and you don't know what the hell they're talking about. And if we don't know what the hell they're talking about, how can their people know? And how can their people get inspired? And how can their customers want to be part of that? And I think there's this huge gap between anyway, we're talking about the process. I'm getting a bit off track. We'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that, but I think
Yeah.
that's very, very relevant. Okay, so the first one is really figuring out figuring out the purpose.
Or you're seeking to change.
This.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that also links you in with other organizations. So you can start to collaborate instead of compete, because there'll be other people that are seeking to change that story as well. So it's kind of starting to change the landscape. Then we look at the story values. And I call them that because a lot of people will say, but we've already got values. And then I'll look at those values, and those values will quite often be a set of behaviors or orders for their staff. So this is very much about creating a set of shared values that are heart-centered, that can be shared with their people, with their customers, with their suppliers, with everybody. So it's about being more human. And from there, we look at, okay, who are the heroes of your story? And we usually I start with just one, otherwise it just gets way too complicated. And we start to explore their world and see things from there. I get them to stand in their customer's shoes. And it's normally creative writing, or it's a thought leadership conversation where we just talk and I listen out for what they're saying and know the things to kind of capture and ask them curated questions. Then from there, it's okay, we've got your hero, we know what their world is like. Who's your mentor? What kind of mentor are you? And obviously, a mentor is a mentor, but as soon as you ask what type of mentor you are, you can start to use archetypes, and you can actually pin an identity on your organization by choosing what type of mentor you want to be. So,
and do you have specific archetypes?
Yeah, I've got there's a woman called Margaret Hartwell who created a deck of archetypes. There's 60 of them. And I work with those. Okay. Yeah, they're incredible. She's incredible. She created them. Quite a lot of the brands that I work with are the rebels of disruptors. There's a lot of change.
Which makes sense. Yeah, trying to do things differently.
Yeah. And so as soon as you have that, this is where, as a wordsmith, you have your identity, you have your tone of voice. I looked up a load of the massive brands, brand identities online. You can go in and have a look. And the tone of voice sections were just made no sense, or they didn't even have them. And so that will give you your tone of voice. And then it's a curated conversation of what happens when the hero and mentor meets. And that becomes a conversation that can then, so that becomes a conversation between them that captures everything that you would ideally love to say to your customer without having to be in the room. So it's a kind of a chance meeting that's created. And then finally,
sorry, so would that almost be like a pitch on the website without really having to pitch in person, or it's just that first meeting?
No, this is for the creation of the story. Okay, so what happens is the last bit of work is then a future piece. So that's looking at your hero and where they are in the future. And what happens is once all of those and all of the assignments surrounding those, once they're all done, I go away and I take all of those assignments and all of those words and I create a brand story document with them. And that document contains your purpose, your vision, or your messaging that can be used on your website, on your sales decks, on internal comms, external comms, all of that. It's the words that represent the heart and soul of your business. And that sits in, at the moment, most of them sit as a Google Doc. So they're forever evolving document then once you start your story on its track. But the next part is about sharing, and then I support them to share that story internally, and then the telling of that story internally and externally as well. So that becomes more of me there's the intense work at the start to create the story, and then I support them with mentoring for 6 or 12 months after the creation of it.
Mentoring them on how they should deliver this and how they can use this.
Yeah, I mean, marketing people, and it's not marketing people and internal comms people and HR people and all the people in the organization who are responsible to bringing it to life. I'm just kind of a sounding board for them. They're brilliant at what they do, but there might be ways of getting used to using that story that they haven't quite mastered. So I just work with them for a short while or a long while, and however long they need, and act as their sounding board and a kind of ideas partner for how best to tell that story.
And why is this whole process so important?
I think it's because it's currently it feels like there's a missing piece within branding, on the branding side of stuff, and within in strategic and thought leadership and strategy and thought leadership. So internally, what that kind of looks like a lot is that organizations will, sorry, I don't know if you can hear that, as my Belle, the rescue dog, in the background.
That's okay. We love doggies that come visit. So when I'm teaching my yoga classes, sometimes I've got my dog trying to open the door and it's Ridgeback, and she does know how to open the door.
So where was I? What was I talking about? So yes, quite often the leadership team will come up with a new strategy, and they will go to their people and say, this is our new strategy. Tell everyone about it internally. Get them to tell everyone, all our customers and potential customers, about it. And they're handing them a strategy which is written in the language of the boardroom that nobody outside the boardroom actually uses. So there's this huge gap of actually what's missing is the translation of that strategy into a story, into that language of story that everybody else in the world speaks. So there's that piece of work. And also with branding, it's about, okay, everyone, we jump in and we go design led and we come up with logos and visuals for what we're doing. But actually, if we just spend the time creating this, it's like a film script. If you think about a film script, when there's a film made, everybody reads the script first and then they do their job. Their job is bringing that script to life. The brand story, it looks a bit like a script, that acts as the script for everyone in that organization, the designers, the marketers, HR, legal, like ops, everybody, to then bring that story to life.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Because you want your employees to buy into this and feel like they're a part of this amazing business that's offering whatever it's offering, creating whatever it's creating. But when you get just delivered something that doesn't really make any sense in jargon that you don't understand, what are you going to buy into? It ends up just being a job. And it sounds like the companies and the people that you would work with then are definitely, there is a specific type of business that you would target.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everybody. But I think people are waking up to the power of story. Do you want your people to deliver a strategy or tell a story? I think it will begin to catch on to more people. But I think the people at the moment who are really interested, they're quite conscious. They're conscious leaders. They're here because their business, they want to do good with their business. And they maybe have been through the B Corp process. There may be other things that they've done. They might have just created a sustainability strategy. There's a whole new story that's emerging about them and that they want to tell. And actually going in with the same old thinking when their thinking has changed so much, kind of, it's that old Einstein kind of saying, this is a different way of thinking for a new way of being.
Well, it sounds like it's not a one and done. So this is actually a document that can, as you said, it's living. So as things evolve, then the story can also evolve, just like a movie evolves.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you can go and you could start to work on different heroes. It's always evolving because we're always evolving. A story keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And you think about any website as an example, it's not a static document, on a screen. It's an ever evolving thing, and stories are as well. Yeah. And
is there any science behind this, or is there any data on, story creation, how it can support businesses?
I have to confess, I'm not really one for loads of data, but yeah, I mean, the psychology's there. And I think we are, as humans, stories are our emotional DNA. And I think Joseph Campbell he did so much work around this and the importance of myth and story. They're how we shape society. Anything that happens, we tell a story. This podcast so far, it's just all of it is stories. And
Yeah,
so
I even think about, the greatest leaders for me were the ones that were able to tell a story to get you on board. So actually, with that said, I'd love to hear, just sort of switch over to sort of business and leadership and get your thoughts on good leadership and what that looks like.
yeah, I think we see lots of bad leadership. There's a lot of bad leadership in the world at the moment. And it's actually through working with Paul from Diary Detox, where what's really come to light is this need for, there are two types of leadership. There is people leadership and there is thought leadership. And so the work that I do is very much the thought leadership side of things. And then you're getting spirited leadership as well, which is very much about being present to that kind of, that working from a spiritual place, whatever that looks like for you. And I think, so in terms of leaders, I think it's the thought leaders that really excite me in the world, rather than the business leaders. I'm not seeing, there's the Patagonias and people like that who are amazing. But where I get my inspiration from is from the thought leaders in the world at the moment.
So let's touch on spirited leadership, because you just brought that up. You talked about the universe having your back and turning to the universe as you founded the Brand New Story. What is spirited leadership?
So I think spirited leadership for me is about looking after, leading from a place. It's really simple. It's about leading from a place of love and collaboration and all of the aspects of love, rather than leading through a place of fear. And I think there was somebody that said all emotions that humans possess come from one of two core emotions. They're either from love or fear. And so when you lead from love, everything changes. I saw there was an amazing post this morning on LinkedIn that I saw, and it was Mark Cuddigan from, I think that's his name, from Ella's Kitchen, the photo of his daughter holding up a competitor's bar of what like a I don't know, like a protein bar or something like that. Yeah. And he said to his daughter, why are you buying a competitor's bar? And she just said, Dad, they're a B Corp. And
wow.
Yeah, totally. And that is the difference. When you lead with love, it's about collaboration. And it's about all of those B Corps are working to change the story of business from being supportive of the destruction of nature and humanity, blah, 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 all of that kind of stuff, to being about love and about caring, becoming custodians for the planet.
Yeah. And that actually there is opportunity out there for all of us. There is abundance. And if we tap into that, there's a space for each and every one of us. Yeah. Going back to your idea about curating this brand new story, it's unique for each company, which means that, there's space for all of us to exist and to offer something.
Yeah. And you talked about the science earlier. And one thing I do remember from when I was researching what is a brand story all those years ago is that when advertising started out in the 50s, there were two main types of psychology at the time. There was Maslow with his hierarchy of needs, which was all, self-actualization and all the positive. That's probably the love aspect of the psychology. And then there was Freud, which, let's not go there with all of that. And one of the leading ad salesmen and people of the time was actually Freud's nephew. So advertising became about building a sense of lack, making people feel crap about themselves in order to sell them something, that whole FOMO thing. So I think that is what's changing at the moment, is we are shifting into an era where it's time to have love in business.
And just within organizations too. Yeah. I definitely was in an unhealthy, and have been in some unhealthy organizations where it was really led by fear. And I woke up every day in like a panic attack because, did I do the right thing yesterday? Oh gosh, what's going to happen today? And actually there is a big transition now. And I love this idea about collaboration and, there's enough room for all of us. Mm-hmm. So you also talk a lot about, and I know you're passionate about bringing the sacred into business. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think that's been a little bit of a journey. I think it still feels a little bit weird to talk about it. And I think that's because so many of us who are on the personal growth journey or on a spiritual journey, we've almost been sat in the spiritual closet for however long. And I think that's really changing now. And being sacred leadership for me is about choosing to combine your spiritual practices that, like I get up every day, I will meditate, I will do my practice, I will kind of tune in to like realign all my energies, my physical, spiritual, emotional, and mental energies, and just come into that sense of calmness that is that place of love. And then I take that same energy into my business. And it changes things. I think we're coming towards the end of a very patriarchal time where businesses were run in that very patriarchal way. And I think that's really, people have just had enough. I think COVID was a huge disruptor to that, and things that we're only just starting to see the changes coming in post-COVID, I think.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I think that I definitely can see with some of our clients that there is this shift, that people are becoming much more open. They're aware that they need and they want to support their teams in a much more holistic way. And they can't keep, forcing things to happen or placing the demands. But at the same time, there's still some, I don't know what the right word is, but there's still some, fear, I guess. Yeah. Resistance to doing things a little bit differently. And I totally get what you say. You're talking about the spirit and sacredness in business is still a little bit like, So if someone did question that, how do you respond? Someone said, well, I just don't get it.
So I think it is about, when approaching the sacred in business, it's about practicing what I preach. And that's to put myself in the shoes of the person I'm speaking to, because in order to bring them to this work, they might not want full on woo-woo version. And it may be that they just, standing in their shoes, they just want the more practical elements, or the language needs to be a bit different. And so, it's about, they're the hero in this. And if you're mentoring them in a way, you need to do in a way that's comfortable for them and that resonates with them.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
And I actually have caught myself using that, this isn't that woo-woo anymore. And actually, I'm trying to stop that, because this is all becoming more mainstream.
Yeah.
Just everyone needs to start somewhere. We all started somewhere. I meditated for a first time at some point. I remember thinking that early period, like, people are probably looking at me when I have my eyes closed, thinking, what's she doing? That's so weird. Now for me, it's so normal, but we all start everything. There's a first for everything. So that whole idea around language and just starting small seems right. Starting in a way that seems right for that's relevant for that person. What are you seeing out there right now in businesses when it comes to the sacred and spirit? Are businesses really starting to evolve? Are you seeing the forward momentum, or we're just at stage one?
I think we're very much at stage one. I think that what we're seeing is the existing story of there being no sacredness in leadership starting to crumble. And we're seeing that because people are leaving. We've had the Great Resignation. People have been leaving businesses en masse. Very much, I think COVID was a massive reset of what was important in life. And that was the people around us, the friends, the family. And people were incredible during that time. The businesses that kept going, where people just overnight had to shift everything they were doing. So I think we're in the early stages of it. And I think it's something that will start off, like anything, there will be those early adopters, and then it will become much bigger.
Just something that came to mind that would be so interesting. It's like another project that you could work on, like having the brand new story for this new way of business, this new way of working.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've already thought about that. And I was like, but that's almost a story in and of itself, like the past way of doing things and this new way. And what does that story look like?
Yeah. And I think there are people that are already doing that. I think that, and those are the people that I want to work with, who want to shift the way work is being done. You know, I mean, just even going into the office is completely different. I've noticed that my husband went back in, he's been going back into the office a little bit where he is, but it's still desks everywhere and nobody in. And I think a lot of people, teams are looking to go back in on the same day and everything. And an office is becoming a space where people are in community and with their work family. And so I think the way offices will become more comfortable. There'll be different kind of spaces within them. So
yeah,
I think,
and the purpose of them is becoming different. Like, how do you use your space? Is it a communal space to bring people together? And then, you know, if you have to do real deep work, you actually work from home or you work from a place that makes more sense for you.
yeah. And, you know, the government wanted, I'm thinking of Jacob Rees-Mogg, wanted everybody back in the office. And the way he did that was by telling them they were all very naughty and they needed to get back in the office and they were lazy. And that is a very patriarchal kind of, finger wagging thing. Whereas actually it's like, create beautiful spaces that people want to go into and they get out of bed in the morning and they think, yes, I'm going there. It's an amazing space and I'm getting to see those people. That's completely different.
Yeah. And then also that trust element. I mean, I think the people that are demanding people to come back to the office are ones that don't trust their employees to be doing their job. And maybe that's because they haven't given them a purpose to do their job.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about, you mentioned your practices to get yourself set up. And obviously I'm really passionate about well-being. So I'd love to know just, what are your non-negotiables and how do you stay well as you're on this journey to creating brand new story?
Well, it's a work in progress, definitely. My first non-negotiable is every day I do a daily practice, which was taught to me by Jarvis Smith from Spirited Leadership. He also runs My Green Pod and the P Awards. But twice a year now, he runs with Pip from Fieldwork. He runs a retreat up in Yorkshire at Broughton Hall, which is where we met.
It is where we met, and I'm going to link up all those details because it's relevant for all of you listening.
Yeah, and I met Jarvis over LinkedIn, which is brilliant because that's the last person I expect. So yes, the sacred, that's how it showed up for me, was on LinkedIn of all places, which is great. And he has a couple of great practices, which is all about, aligning your energy, your mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional bodies each day. I've been practicing that for nearly 2 years now. It was hard to start with, the idea that Jarvis says that we have a spiritual team around us made me kind of giggle a little bit when I first met him, even though I was really into all of that kind of stuff. And now every day I have a practice and I really feel amazing by the end of it. Like I feel clear, ready to go into the day. The intuition comes to me, synchronicities happen. And it's really made a massive difference. And it's helping me to live in times that I think if I didn't have this practice, it would be a very different story. I think I'd be very ungrounded and not in a great place with my well-being. So there's that. And then I go to Pilates classes.
And Rachel, just that practice in the morning, just out of curiosity, how long is that for you?
So it can be anything from 5 minutes, I need to quickly do this, or it can last up to half an hour, 40 minutes. I don't do it for like a really, really long time. I know some people will sit and meditate for an hour at a time, and I just don't do that. But it can be a mixture of things. I can start off with the practice, and then afterwards I feel called to do some like journaling for a few pages, and stuff comes up, questions that I've been struggling with there. It just depends really.
Right. No, thank you for that, because I think, as you said, some people feel like, oh, I don't have time to do an hour or 30 minutes, but you can do 5 minutes if that's all you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Pilates, sorry, I had interrupted.
Yeah. So I do Pilates as well, at least a couple of times a week. And we have the dog, so I walk her as well. And that we're lucky here because I can just walk out and be in the fields and in the woods. And it's absolutely stunning countryside. So I go out for my walks in nature, and that just helps to really settle things as well.
And do you have a definition, a clear definition of well-being for you?
There was something I read last night where the definition of well-being was being well. And I just love that.
So simple,
Yeah,
but it's true.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. And how can everyone find you? Because they need to find you.
Oh,
They need this story. They need to find their story.
Yeah. So online, the website's brandnewstory.co.uk, and LinkedIn, I'm under Rachel Savage, Brand New Story as well on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And we will make sure that all of that is included in the show notes so that people can find you at the click of a button.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Really, really nice to speak with you, and so nice to hear about how Brand New Story is helping businesses to define who they really are and showcase it to the customers and to the world.
Thanks for having me.